You know, being from South Africa, you always go, the D&AD is it is a difficult one. You know, it's not Cannes, it's not one show, it's not Loeries. You kind of go, what is the best South African piece, and you will, you know, of your 10 pieces, you'll choose the one where you really think so it'll win. And the idea is that perception is really true when you're actually judging it. You know, of the 25,000 so-called entries, only 481 actually make it into the book. And in that kind of elimination process, there's some great pieces that fall down the way, you know, and you'd be surprised how kind of certain pieces get resurrected based on discussion. The one thing I found in terms of the entries, in terms of how people enter, is that you got to have a voice to your entry. You know, you put some things on the board and you put it on, people walk past it. I found a lot of the pieces needed a voice. Needed to give you a process, give you context, kind of understand why you've entered certain piece. And a lot of the times those things kind of elevated pieces. I think video case studies are very important. I think you can have a lot of support material in terms of showing the stuff, because it's always nice to tangibly look at the stuff. But the idea is, you know, you have like a minute to convey a great case study. And I think it's important, as much as the kind of effort went into producing an entry, in terms of actually illustrating what you try to do is very important. You know, I did clearly the branding section, and you know, branding again is such a broad thing. You know, what is branding? You know, you have branded contents, you have physical manifestation of experiencing a brand, you know, you have kind of small identities, big identities, what is craft in branding. So people, you know, in terms of these entries, people kind of try to enter as much as they can in whatever category they think something will stand a chance. But in the actual branding category itself, it was very interesting that branded spaces were far more interesting in terms of how people illustrated a brand in a three-dimensional space. I found that in terms of, firstly, from an entry point of view, the illustration of what is branded spaces and how are people experiencing brands. You know, in terms of having a logo on a beautiful paper, on a nice brochure, print some nice techniques is okay, but the kind of pervasion of people actually going into a space and kind of experiencing it, and those are kind of exciting places where branding is going at the moment. So if you look at the entries, you know, quite clearly there's some amazing identities, again, standalone identities. There was like the big one, which was, I think, the Gordon's Gin, which was, again, taking a very established brand and giving it a quirky kind of nuance that showed that it was very considered in the today's time of how a heritage brand could be beautiful. There was a Cognate Hotel, which is again a beautiful illustration, and what was nice about this piece was they took the history of the hotel, which was over 100 years old, and they took an illustration of almost 100 years and layered it and created a one-off illustration that kind of you could digitally go back in time, but yet it could be one image. You know, and then they took that thing into a branding exercise and looked at it from simple thing, from collateral to digital, how that actually became a piece. And I think that was interesting, of a fusion of from illustration to what the space was actually, to understanding something very beautifully crafted, and then it is a brand. So these layers, I think brands have got to do that, where you got to go typeface, color, logo, tonality, illustration. How does it live when someone just looks at it on an app, and how does it physically manifest itself in an actual space? So those were quite interesting to see, because you know, some people think in isolation. They look at, oh, the typeface is beautiful, oh, that's lovely, but the website's amazing. I think collectively, you know, if you look at branding, is a total experience. So I think it was interesting to see the entries that did that. You know, there's a great piece on Miss Co, and if you look at it, it's an amazing understanding of a restaurant, but yet if you look at it, it's super fresh. If you look at the online stuff, you look at the physicality of the space, you look at the psychology in terms of how people navigate the space, and then you just look at a pure identity, kind of all kind of merged together to create one thing. In terms of some of the stuff from a craft point of view in design, I thought there was amazing kind of illustration for the Cognate, as I said to you. There was amazing understanding of, they had this festival called the Green Man, which obviously they looked at how the typeface, but again, it was experiential of how this festival was so beautiful. You know, we didn't just look at it from an isolation of the typeface. We looked at it how people interacted and engaged with the actual medium and the actual day and how they remembered what this was about, and it really kind of stood out. So in terms of standout value, you know, the Green Man Festival was amazing. There was an identity which was done obviously very clearly for Tamabi, which is a Japanese identity. Again, the freshness of how this work looked. Again, fresh is always amazing, but is it relevant? You know, does it actually change behavior? So just being fresh is one thing, but how does it kind of be relevant to the category is very important, and that came through very clearly. Again, simplicity is always going to be paramount, but again, simplicity to a point where it kind of prompts thought, it kind of engages, you know. Then there was a major discussion, I think, on you know, this year the D&AD is very much so about brands that do good. And there's a white pencil, and there's a massive discussion on what the white pencil is. You know, how do you get a so-called brand like Coca-Cola doing good? You know, how do you get Unilever doing good? You know, and the idea is it's quite a difficult thing to go, well, you carbonated water and you detergent and you have to do good for the planet. And I think those big brands are really taking responsibility in terms of, are they doing things just because they have to, or they're doing something significant in the world? And I think the D&AD white pencil this year really is about what are brands doing significantly to change behavior, to change people, to understand that our communications industry is alive in terms of what we're doing as a big picture.